thank you, Niklas, for joining us. And I think we've had many conversations in all these years, and I was always inspired by your journey. I'm sure everyone is going to be inspired as well. So I just wanted to start by asking you, how do you see, like, almost zooming out and seeing the macro perspective, and from the point of view of a tech entrepreneur, one of the leading venture capitalists in the world, and so a technology leader in the broader sense. How do you see the world right now, especially throughout this COVID-19 crisis, and how do you see digital and the new digital economy, as we sometimes call it, evolving in this macro landscape?
Yeah, sure. And before I answer that, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm so excited to be here, and such a big fan of what you're doing, Jose, as well. And so thrilled about all the initiatives you are taking now with your foundation as well. So I think we have a lot of things that we share in terms of our visions and how we want to do things in terms of continue to build something that can improve the state of our society and our planet. It's and a question on how I see the world of tech. Last fall, kind of coming into the 22, I spent a lot of time thinking and also having conversation with a lot of people about the next 10 years between 2020 and 2030, which I think, I thought, and I still think it's the same, that this is going to be an extremely transformational period in our society, both for us as humans, for our planet, and technology and entrepreneurship is going to have a big impact here. Obviously, if you look back the last 10 years and the last 10 years before that, technology have already had a huge impact, and if anything, the last 5 years tech has had a very big impact, both good and bad. And I think this is maybe one thing that we who are in the technology world have kind of woken up and realized, that we actually have a greater responsibility than just making great tech, because technology can have such big influence on society. So I think we have a bigger responsibility as entrepreneurs, as investors, and others to shape the technology for the next 10 years or the next 20 years to be there as a force for good. And that's what I'm very excited about. How, if I think about some of the investment we have made in the last few years, is of course a lot of AI, but also quantum computing, which is going to be real in next few years. We're very, very excited about areas around computational and synthetic biology and AI and so forth. And if you combine some of those technologies, you probably in the next 10 years, you very likely will see a lot of progress in healthcare. I think you will see a lot of diseases that we can treat that we haven't been able to treat. And I think you will see a lot of people healthier, living longer. And that's one thing that I'm super excited about, the technology. I also think that, I'm not only think, I think that most of us are fully aware of that these next 10 years are going to be very pivotal in terms of the environment and climate. And here I also think that entrepreneurship will play a role. It's not going to be the one thing that solves it, but it's going to play its role to transform a lot of things that are using or emitting greenhouse gases today to sustainable methods. So those are the things I'm most excited about in technology. So then, of course, that was kind of the vision coming in January, and then in March we got COVID and everything got kind of disrupted. But what is really remarkable now, what we've seen in the last 3 months over the summer, and is how the acceleration that this pandemic have had on digitalization, both for enterprises and for consumers. Of course, we're shopping more and more online. We're working very, very differently. You're working from a nice location, I'm working from remote location, and then we're thinking about going to meet other, co-workers and others from time to time. We think very differently how we work with, so this all have had a huge acceleration on digitalization. So it's going faster than ever.
The last time we were chatting about philanthropy, and at the point I used the expression, which is a commonly used expression, which is give back. And and I remember you interrupted me and said, "Hang on a sec." And you had a very interesting perspective, which I really made me think. And also, obviously linking that to impact and making sure you do philanthropy with an impact mentality, which is very much part of at the core of the way we operate as a foundation. We're just starting, obviously, but having impact from day one and measuring that impact is very important for us. But you had some incredible insights that I think everyone would love to learn from you in terms of how you look at all these things and how the world, society looks at philanthropy and giving back as such.
No, sure. And when my wife and I started our foundation in 2007, there was something that we thought, we reacted in this word giving back. It's like, what do we need to give back? We didn't take anything in the first place. We don't feel that we have to give back, but we thought about, but of course we want to, contribute to society. But how I was thinking about this, or how we were thinking about this, that it's much more thinking about this as, you give back because sorry, pardon my language, but you may feel, if you're an entrepreneur and all of a sudden you have this huge success, you worked so hard for 10 years or something, or maybe longer. As you said, in your case, you started in the 90s as a programmer, and then you had a huge success and a successful IPO. And it wasn't overnight. It was many times. It's a lifetime of labor, and of course, it's a lot of luck and as well. We all know that, but it's also hard work, and so it's not something that you didn't win the lottery, and so it shouldn't be that, I think. So, I don't think in my case, I didn't want to feel like I have bad conscience because I've come across money and therefore I need to give it back. I thought about it more about, okay, I'm so fortunate to be in this position, and this is hard-earned money. How can I use this to have the biggest possible impact? So I need to think about it as investing with a social return profile. So I'm investing in a nonprofit because I want to have an impact, whether that is with the causes that I choose, whether that is entrepreneurship, whether it's climate, whether that is human rights. And if you think about it as an investing, then you start thinking about which are the causes, which are the organizations I should provide with a grant, and how do I hold them accountable so that they as an organization or as a project have accountability to actually have impact. Because there are many cases in nonprofits where there are people who are amazing, they have such a great cause and great purpose and such a passion, but what they do is actually not having an impact, and it's not efficient to fund those projects. Because if they don't have impact. So I think also as philanthropists, and I think that's more natural for those of us who are entrepreneurs, is to think about this a little bit almost like a venture capital firm. It's like, okay, what are your KPIs? How can you really have an impact with whatever root cause problem that you want to solve? So that's how I'm thinking about it as investing. Because if I only think about give it back, then I might, okay, you can write a check, you give it back, and you feel good, and you can move on with your life. But then that might not have the desired impact.
I was thinking of asking you to do a bit of a role play game, so to say, because when I look at Sweden, and for us at the foundation, we always said the foundation is primarily about knowledge, and pragmatically the first project's about education. But ultimately, knowledge for what? And we think, it's all about human development, right? And
Yes.
human development has many areas: education, health, security, etc., etc., environment. And Sweden happens to be, if not the most, the leader in the human development OECD rank. I haven't looked last time, but certainly in the top three consistently. So one of the most developed societies from a human development, which is different from economic development, right? So we all have countries like the US, for example, is the best example, where there's a lot of wealth being created, trillions of dollars of wealth per year being created, but very little human development in some areas, unfortunately. But Sweden has really taught the world so many amazing lessons. And I know you're very humble, and I know Swedish culture is very humble by culture, and you yourself. But let's do therefore, I'm going to try to break through and do this role play. If Portugal was a person, and I was that person, and Sweden was another person, and you were that person, and if I went and asked for advice to you as a bigger brother or a mentor, and if it was only the two of us in this room, so that you wouldn't have to be politically correct or culturally humble, what advice would you give me?
Wow, that's a big ask. I would think about that. I would kind of think about, maybe you should think about, if it's about developing, a country so that most people are healthy and happy, and then I think that having as much equality as possible, equal opportunities, is probably really good. And I do think it starts with access to education. And one thing that Sweden have done really well is that everyone, it's changed lately. It's very much, and I'm not sure if this is the better, but all schools were public schools, and now actually there's a bunch of private schools, and I'm not so sure. It's a bit of an experiment. But even with the private schools, they cannot charge more than the others. So everyone has still equal access to the schools, both on primary and secondary schools, and all the universities are free of tuition. So they're financed by the state. And also there's a centralized system to apply to these universities. You don't need to go and apply to each university. So it's very, very easy for anyone, regardless who you are, where you're from, to apply to university. Obviously, if you don't have the aptitude, or if you don't have the support from your family and your environment, you're probably less likely to go to university. But I think this social mobility is real. It's probably like Sweden. I don't know if it's the most social mobile, but one of the most social mobile countries in Europe. And I think that has a tremendous impact on enabling anyone to do, to become an entrepreneur, and or to play to their strengths, or be a doctor or a lawyer. So I think that equal access to education, that leads to social mobility. We don't have, also with the social mobility, is also that it's a very kind of there's a lot of equality in terms of, there's really little distinction between kind of different. We don't have different classes, like if you think about UK, which very much have clearly different kind of classes in your society. We maybe there are, but they're very, very diffuse and very subtle. So I think that social mobility is critical. And I think also there's so I think that was something I would encourage you, Mr. Portugal, to kind of embrace, but also kind of play to your strength as a small country, where how can you become really competitive in working as one. And this is actually something I would say that you should look at Finland, or siblings over east in Finland, because when I go there, I'm so impressed how they are so collaborative and so little ego, where they always are between competitors. They're collaborating across, to make things happen. And that's where they are much better than we are in Sweden, to collaborate, to just solve the problems in a collaborative way. So I think maybe those would be some of the things to focus on. I would say that our healthcare system is maybe something that you can look at, but maybe not copy, because while it's a free healthcare system and everyone has equal access, it's not as good as it could be. I think that we have a lot to learn from Portugal when it comes to taking care of the elderly people in society. We have a very utilitarian kind of view, that when people get old, we like to send them to elderly care homes and spend as little money on that elderly care homes as possible, instead of thinking about them as family members and people with dignity that we should kind of really embrace and take care of. So I think we have certainly lots to learn in that area.